Our next guest this evening is an expert when it comes to understanding the cost of irresponsible marketing campaigns, media and bullying that leads to devastating effects on both men and women.
Indeed. Lorna Garner is the Interim Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer of the largest charity in the UK supporting anyone affected by eating disorders or difficulties with food, weight and shape. Lorna, welcome to Living the Life. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you for coming in. So, Lorna, tell us, how much of an issue is this? How far does this go, this issue of body image?
Body image doesn't cause eating disorders, but body image is a great contributor to triggering behaviours that can exacerbate existing eating disorders. But aside from that, just on a sort of human level, it's very, very wrong to give people the idea that there is just one type and shape that is acceptable and appropriate.
Absolutely.
And there was that horrible campaign, wasn't there, which I wish we could show an image of today, but we can't for legal reasons, of this so-called "Is Your Body Beach Ready" campaign, wasn't there, on the London Underground or subway for our international viewers. That was, you know, it was showing the kind of ideal, in inverted commas, stereotypical, you know, auto-generated, graphic-created woman in a bikini, as if that somehow is the ideal woman. It's crazy, isn't it?
But also the message is, from that particular advertising campaign, if you don't look like this, you can't go on a beach.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely. And I mean, just to take that point on, which you made, I mean, we're all very different. And I think sometimes these campaigns, these fashion campaigns, for example, they hide behind the idea of it being health or promoting health. But it's far from that, isn't it?
Interestingly, in this particular campaign, the product that they were promoting could be very unhealthy because it was pure protein, and we know that if you overeat pure protein, you damage your kidneys. So to be promoting the idea of this being a healthy body, A, it's wrong because they're giving the message that you can only go on the beach if you look like this. B, they're promoting the idea that if you have a protein-rich diet, you're going to be healthy and you can have this kind of body. And C, I just think that in terms of where we've come as a society, as a civilization, that to be exposing people continually to this kind of cheap visualisation of what a woman looks like, well, I just think very, very wrong and very sad.
It certainly is. I mean, it is shocking, isn't it? Because people don't realise the implications of this. It's a starting point, isn't it? And of course, I appreciate you're the professional on this, but my perception is that there's a starting point, the spark as such, and that can lay down a very dangerous road, can't it?
It can. If we were to talk about the causes of eating disorders, we know that they're multi-causal. Sometimes there is a lot of research being done at the moment into genetics because there is an indication they're genetic, and sometimes it's about the age of the person, so you might have biochemical changes that exacerbate things. But there is an impact from external forces, from peer pressure. And there has been research done about the change in attitudes towards body image and towards eating and relationship with food amongst the migrating societies who come to somewhere like the West, who come to Britain, and the changes that you might see in how they perceive themselves, and also the incidence of eating disorders. So where, for example, in one study, they compared young girls in Egypt to a study of young girls from Egypt who were in America. What they found was that there was no incidence of eating disorders with the young girls, or even the same issue of body image with the young girls in Egypt. But transplant those people into a different culture with different pressures and different expectations, and that could exacerbate it.
Absolutely. It's interesting you say that because we were doing some research as well, and we found that a lot of these eating disorders, they're a big issue within sort of South Asian communities in Britain and other ethnic minorities. Is that true? And why would you think that is? I mean, is that because they're being supplanted from one environment to another?
The evidence is that the Asian, particularly Indian continent, Asian community in the UK is the second highest cohort of patients in eating disorders, which is very worrying.
That's extraordinary considering, I mean, people always look at it the other way when they think about South Asian communities. Obviously, the kind of diet, the kind of foods that we tend to eat, and I mean, I'm one of these people, tend to be quite high in fat and things like that. So we're always told to be wary of what we're eating in our diet and what have you. So are people overcompensating, or do you think it's a combination? You mentioned it's a multifaceted thing, eating disorders. It's not about any one thing. But do you think it's a combination of overcompensating maybe for that poor diet or lifestyle, or the cultural implications of being a South Asian and the kind of things that you're going to consume, and the environment where you're surrounded by these ideal body types?
Two things. First of all, eating disorders covers a range. So people tend to think of things like anorexia or bulimia nervosa when they think about eating disorders, but actually it includes binge eating disorder and emotional overeating. So people will pendulum swing between a range of body sizes and physical impact, depending upon the eating disorder that they have. And actually you can't just look at somebody and assume that they have an eating disorder because of their body shape or size.
Yes, it's a really interesting point.
But in terms of the impact on cultural impact on young people who come from overseas, there hasn't been, we are aware, there hasn't been enough really good quality research done. That has been done seems to indicate that it's a combination potentially of the clash of culture and also the intergenerational clashes that you might have, but also the being kind of torn between different values of, for instance, one young Somali person who was interviewed said, where we come from, thin means you're poor.
Wow,
So
okay.
if you look like you're poor in this country, that's actually an embarrassment for the family. And so if you are a young person who is suffering from anorexia nervosa, and that is the cultural environment that you live in, there isn't really, you're not really encouraged to do something about it, to recognise it, because you would fear that you might be embarrassing your family or bringing shame on your family.
Obviously, we were talking partly today, we're celebrating people's backgrounds, diversity, beauty. It's not just, those who are more wealthy in this country or perhaps of certain backgrounds that, have historically existed here. Especially somebody new coming to the UK, it's very easy to perhaps slip into a circumstance like we were hearing about just before the break, Lorna, isn't it? It doesn't, whatever your background and ethnicity.
I think when people transplant and they move somewhere into a different culture, particularly for the next generation, we all of us, it doesn't matter where we're from or what our circumstance, we want to be normal, we want to be the same. And so it must be very difficult for people who have very distinct culture and very strong identity to come to somewhere where we are pretty much a melting pot now. There's the sense of what is British, or even what is English, just as a small part of Britain, the sense of what that is less and less than it used to be. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? And so to come to this country and to have a very strong sense of identity and then to try and fit in and be like everybody else, that must be very, very difficult and must be quite difficult for families with the different generations as well. And also language. And I know that particularly with the Asian community, you will have some families where the grandparents don't speak English or they speak very little English, and then the younger generation only speak English. So that must be quite difficult too.
We're finding that a lot.
Wow.
A lot of youngsters who came here when they were maybe 5 or 6 or 7, that sort of age, are not learning the language, Shona or Ndebele, and are only speaking English. And there's that sort of, that rift.
Lorna, if we can start with you, tell us your message.
I would say that eating disorders are serious illnesses, and they do cost lives. In fact, it has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, eating disorders, and that's a statistic that very few people realise. So I think people should be aware They should educate themselves. They should seek information. And if you have any doubts whatsoever, whether you or somebody that you love has an eating disorder, have a look at our website, www.b-eat.co.uk. Have a look there, and you will find information that enables you to go and get further help.